Hello, wherever you are right now. What time is it for you, morning, late night, or somewhere in between? Which country are you listening from today? If this kind of slow history helps you relax, you can like it, subscribe to it, and leave a comment for me. I really do read them, and I'm always glad to see where you're listening from. Now just settle in. Let your shoulders drop a little. And listen. Most people imagine pirates as wild men who chose danger. But what if piracy was not a dream? What if it was the last door left open? Picture an ordinary man. Not a legend. Not a monster. Just a man who was hungry. In the late 1600s and early 1700s, across England, Scotland, Ireland, and the American colonies, life for common people was narrow and unforgiving. Most men were born into the same work their fathers had done, and most of that work barely fed a family. Land was owned by a few. Power rested with even fewer. And when bad weather came, or war came, or taxes rose again, as they always did, there was no cushion. Only debt. Only hunger. For many young men, the sea was not a calling. It was an escape from starvation on land. Merchant ships promised wages, food, and a bed, sometimes. But the reality was harsh. Sailors signed contracts they could not read. Once aboard, they were trapped. Pay was delayed or never given. Food rotted. Water stank. Disease spread quietly through the decks. Discipline was brutal. Whippings were public. Officers could beat a sailor for speaking back, or simply for being slow. There was no court to complain to. At sea, the captain was law, judge, and executioner. Now imagine war breaking out. 'Cause it always did. European empires fought constantly. England against France, Spain against England, everyone against everyone else. Wars created thousands of ships overnight. Navies needed men fast, and they took them by force. Press gangs roamed port cities like London, Bristol, and Liverpool. They grabbed men from taverns, from docks, even from their homes. Once pressed, a man belonged to the Navy. Naval life was worse than merchant life. Pay was lower. Discipline was harsher. Desertion meant hanging. Sailors fought not for ideals, but because they were trapped. When wars ended, those same men were thrown back onto the docks. No pension. No compensation. Thousands of trained sailors suddenly had no work. Ports overflowed with idle men who knew ships, ropes, weapons, and had nothing to lose. Slavery also shaped this world in quiet, cruel ways. Enslaved Africans worked plantations across the Caribbean and the Americas, producing wealth that flowed back to Europe. That wealth built ships and empires, but it did not lift ordinary sailors. Instead, it created dangerous trade routes guarded by guns and greed. Sailors watched human beings bought and sold like cargo. Some were forced to help. Some were beaten alongside them. Some slowly realized that the system crushing enslaved people was the same system grinding them down, only more slowly. Pirate ships, when they appeared, looked different. They did not promise glory. They promised fairness. Crews voted on captains. Loot was divided by agreed rules. Injuries were compensated. A man who lost a leg might receive enough money to survive. Compared to naval life, piracy looked reasonable. Many pirates were not young thrill-seekers. They were veterans, former Navy men, former merchant sailors, men who had been whipped, cheated, starved, and discarded. They did not wake up one day wanting to become criminals. They woke up realizing the law had never protected them. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing on a dock at dusk. The air smells of salt and tar. You have no money. No ship will hire you. The war is over. The city does not need you anymore. In the distance, a black flag moves slowly against the horizon, not as a symbol of chaos, but as a quiet question. And for many ordinary men, that question was impossible to ignore. The decision rarely happened all at once. No thunder. No dramatic vow. It usually began with waiting. Men waited along the docks for days, sometimes weeks. They slept in cheap lodging houses where lice lived in the blankets and coughing never stopped. Ale was watered down. Bread was stale. Every morning they walked the wharves, asking the same question. Any work today, and hearing the same answer. Come back tomorrow. In England, the enclosure of common lands had already pushed thousands off farms and into cities. Families that once survived by grazing animals or growing small crops now depended entirely on wages. When trade slowed, hunger came fast. Parish charity barely covered the old and the sick. Able-bodied men were expected to fend for themselves, even when there was nowhere to go. Across the Atlantic, in colonial ports like Boston, New York, Charleston, and Port Royal, the situation was no kinder. Wages were unstable. Merchants controlled credit. One unpaid debt could land a man in prison, where he still had to pay for his own food. Many did not survive long inside. The sea was always there, breathing slowly against the hulls, promising movement when life on land stood still. Men talk. Sailors always did. Stories moved faster than ships. They spoke of vessels that did not fly national colors, of crews where a man's voice counted, of ships where food was shared equally and captains could be removed if they abused power. First, these stories sounded dangerous, illegal, but danger was already everywhere. Disease killed more sailors than cannon fire ever did. A single voyage could end a man's life just as surely as a noose. So the question changed. Not is piracy dangerous, but is anything else safer? Many pirate crews formed through mutiny, not recruitment. A merchant ship already at sea, already exhausted, already angry. Wages unpaid. Food rationed again. A beating delivered for nothing. At some point, a few men would quietly agree that they had nothing left to lose. Historical records show this pattern again and again. The crew of the Revenge, the Whydah, the Queen Anne's Revenge. Many began as lawful ships. The line between sailor and pirate was thin, drawn more by circumstance than character. Once a ship turned pirate, rules were written. Not laws passed by kings, but articles agreed upon by men who had lived under unchecked authority and did not want it again. These articles specified how loot was divided, how disputes were settled, how much compensation was paid for injuries, loss of a finger, a hand, an eye. This mattered. On Navy ships, injury meant discharge into poverty. On pirate ships, injury meant survival. Piracy also offered something rare for its time: limited equality. Rank existed, but it was earned. Captains were chosen for skill, not birth. Quartermasters could challenge captains. Votes mattered. A man's worth was measured by his usefulness, not his family name. This was not idealism. It was practicality. Pirate ship depended on cooperation. Fear alone did not keep a crew together. Shared interest did. The world these men sailed through was shaped by empire and exploitation. The Caribbean Sea was crowded with sugar islands worked by enslaved labor. Spanish silver fleets moved like floating vaults. European nations fought endless wars over trade routes and colonies, then abandoned sailors when treaties were signed. Pirates were not outside this system. They fed on it. They attacked merchant ships because that was where wealth moved. They targeted empires because empires were slow and predictable. In a way, piracy was a shadow economy, born from the same forces that created global trade. Some pirates were formerly enslaved men or free black sailors. Pirate ships sometimes offered them roles denied elsewhere. This was not universal, and it was not equality as we understand it today. But compared to the rigid racial hierarchies of colonial society, it was a crack in the wall. Still, the choice came with fear. Governments responded brutally. Executions were public. Bodies were displayed in iron cages along rivers as warnings. The message was clear. Step outside the system and you will be destroyed. Yet the flow of men toward piracy continued. Because poverty does not respond to warnings. Hunger does not fear punishment. Imagine the quiet moment just before a man agrees. The deck creaks under his boots. The night air is cool. Somewhere below, the ocean moves steadily, indifferent to laws and borders. He thinks of debts, of beatings, of promises broken again and again. He is not chasing freedom. He is running from a life that has already decided his worth. And so, without ceremony, another ordinary man crosses the line. Not into legend, but into survival. Once a man crossed that line, there was no clean way back. Piracy changed how time felt. Days were measured not by wages or calendars, but by wind, water, and opportunity. The sea did not care who you had been before. It only cared whether you could pull a rope, load a gun, or keep watch without falling asleep. Life aboard a pirate ship was not constant violence, despite the stories. Much of it was waiting. Long stretches of calm water. Sunlight bleaching the deck. Men repairing sails, scraping hulls, mending clothes with rough thread and calloused fingers. They told stories, sang quietly, argued over cards. These moments mattered because they made the danger survivable. Food was basic but often better than on merchant ships. Fresh meat when captured, salted beef or pork otherwise. Hard bread, sometimes crawling with insects, soaked to make it edible. Rum diluted with water. No abundance, but enough. The real difference lay in dignity. A sailor who had been invisible all his life suddenly had a say. If the captain abused his authority, the quartermaster could call a vote. If a man was cheated, others noticed. The crew understood something learned through suffering. Survival was collective. This did not mean pirates were gentle. Discipline still existed. Theft from the crew could mean marooning. Desertion during battle could mean death. Violence was not absent, it was regulated. And for men used to arbitrary cruelty, rules felt like mercy. Pirates operated in a world shaped by navigation routes and seasons. They learned where ships passed, when treasure fleets sailed, when storms forced vessels close to shore. This knowledge often came from their own past lives as sailors in imperial service. Empires trained the very men who later preyed on them. Many pirates began as privateers, legal pirates during wartime. Governments issued licenses allowing them to attack enemy ships. When wars ended, those licenses vanished overnight, but the ships and crews remained. Some simply kept going, unwilling to return to poverty. This blurred line made piracy both common and confusing. A man could be a hero one year and a criminal the next, without changing his behavior at all. Fear followed pirates constantly. Naval patrols hunted them. Informants sold them out. Some were betrayed by former crewmates seeking pardons. The sea offered freedom, but it also offered nowhere to hide forever. Captured pirates faced trials that were more theater than justice. Guilt was assumed. Executions were designed to entertain and terrify. Hangings drew crowds. Sermons warned of sin and rebellion. The state needed pirates to be monsters, because admitting they were ordinary men would raise uncomfortable questions. Yet letters and records from the time tell a quieter story. Men wrote home when they could. They worried about aging parents. They remembered wives and children left behind. Some sent money secretly, hoping it might reach family without revealing its source. Slavery haunted the pirate world as both a crime and a contradiction. Pirates attacked slave ships, but they also sometimes sold captured cargo. Some crews freed enslaved people and offered them a place. Others treated them as commodities. Piracy did not erase the moral failures of its age. It reflected them. Still, compared to plantation life or naval service, pirate ships could offer something rare: choice. Even if that choice existed within violence, it mattered deeply to men who had never been asked before. Over time the risks increased. Governments cooperated. Navies grew stronger. Safe havens closed. Ports once friendly turned hostile. Pardons were offered to divide crews. Some accepted, hoping to disappear into quiet lives. Many could not adjust. Land felt too small. Authority felt too close. The golden age of piracy burned brightly because it was brief. It thrived in the gaps between wars, laws, and enforcement. Once those gaps closed, survival became harder. Imagine a man standing at the rail at night, watching moonlight ripple across dark water. He knows the odds are narrowing. He knows capture means death. But he also knows that returning to shore means hunger, prison, or forced labor. He is not choosing adventure. He is choosing the only space where his life still belongs to him. The sea stretches out endlessly, quiet and cold. And for now, it still listens. As years passed, the cost of this life settled into the body. Salt-hardened skin. Old wounds never fully healed. Many pirates were already broken men by the time history noticed them. Limps, missing fingers, scarred backs. These were not decorations, but records of labor and punishment long before piracy began. Aging was dangerous at sea. Strength mattered. Quick movement mattered. A man who slowed down risked becoming a burden. And everyone knew it. That knowledge made pirate crews pragmatic, not cruel. Injury payments were not generosity. They were insurance. Anyone could be next. Storms were constant reminders of how small men were. Ships vanished without trace. One mistake during a gale could send a body overboard. Swallowed instantly. There were no funerals at sea. Only brief words and silence. Loss was absorbed and carried quietly. Pirates learned the geography of fear. Certain waters were watched closely. Certain islands offered shelter but no safety. Places like Nassau became temporary refuges. Crowded, lawless, unstable. Taverns filled with men spending quickly, knowing tomorrow was uncertain. Rum dulled memory. Laughter masked exhaustion. These ports were not romantic. They were desperate. Violence flared easily. Disease spread fast. Yet for many, they were the only places where former sailors were not hunted on sight. Governments responded by tightening control. Naval patrols increased. Governors were replaced with men willing to enforce the law harshly. Executions multiplied. Bodies were displayed longer, left to rot as warnings. But fear did not erase piracy. It refined it. Crews became smaller, faster. Ships were chosen for speed, not size. Attacks became brief and precise. Pirates avoided battle when possible. Survival favored caution over bravado. The myth of the reckless pirate ignores this reality. Most pirates wanted to live. They planned. They fled when odds turned bad. The goal was profit without bloodshed because bloodshed brought attention. Records show many encounters ended without a single death. Show of force. A raised flag. Surrender. Transfer of goods. Then silence again. This efficiency unsettled authorities more than chaos ever could. It suggested pirates were not wild animals, but organized men responding rationally to their environment. Some pirates tried to leave the life behind. Pardons were offered, especially when governments needed manpower for new wars. A few accepted and settled quietly. Others were betrayed by rumors or old enemies. The past followed them. There was no social safety net waiting on land. No pensions. No forgiveness. A former pirate aged faster than society allowed. He stood out. He was watched. For enslaved and formerly enslaved pirates, the danger was even greater. Freedom at sea did not guarantee safety ashore. Racial laws reasserted themselves the moment land was reached. Still men kept coming. Young sailors replaced the old. War, poverty, and exploitation continued to produce them. The system did not change. Only the names of those crushed by it. Imagine a quiet morning on deck. The ship drifts gently. The horizon is empty. A man leans against the rail, stretching a stiff shoulder. He thinks about how many years he has survived past expectation. He knows this cannot last forever. But for now the ship still floats. The crew still eats. And no one has raised a whip today. In a world built on obedience, that small piece feels enormous. The silence after a successful capture was often heavier than the fight itself. Once the cargo was taken and the ship released or scuttled, pirates moved quickly. They knew time was their enemy. Every hour increased the chance of pursuit. Lookouts stayed alert. Sails were adjusted. The ocean became a map of possible threats. Division of goods followed strict rules. Coin, fabric, tools, weapons. Everything was counted. Shares were distributed according to rank agreed upon beforehand. No noble bloodlines. No hidden bonuses. A captain earned more, but not excessively. The quartermaster ensured fairness, because fairness kept knives in belts and not in backs. This structure did not come from idealism. Came from memory. Many pirates had been cheated by merchants and officers their entire lives. They understood exactly how resentment grew, so they built systems to contain it. Money itself was temporary. Pirates spent quickly when they reached port. Saving had little meaning in a life measured in risk. Gold did not buy security. Only comfort for a moment. Food, drink, clothing, companionship. Sometimes gifts sent quietly to family through intermediaries. The future was too uncertain to plan deeply. Religion followed them, quietly and inconsistently. Some prayed before battle. Some mocked faith openly. Most lived somewhere in between, shaped by church teachings but aware that churches had never stopped their suffering. Death was too common to ignore, but too close to fear constantly. The sea itself became a kind of faith. Predictable in its unpredictability. Honest in its danger. Authorities worked hard to control the story. Pamphlets described pirates as monsters, demons, enemies of civilization. This language mattered. If piracy was seen as a symptom of poverty and exploitation, then blame would turn inward. It was easier to blame evil men than broken systems. Trials reinforced this image. Pirates were paraded. Confessions were coerced. Sermons were loud. The crowd was meant to feel safe watching order restored. Few asked why so many young men ended up on the gallows. Some pirates, like Blackbeard or Bartholomew Roberts, became symbols larger than themselves. Their names survived because authorities needed faces for fear. But behind every famous name were hundreds of men whose stories ended quietly, lost at sea, buried in unmarked ground, forgotten. The ordinary pirate did not expect to be remembered. He expected to endure as long as possible. Night watches were moments of reflection. Alone with the sound of water against wood, men thought about how their lives had narrowed into this floating world. Some felt regret. Some felt relief. Most felt both. They remembered childhoods shaped by labor. Fathers worn down early. Mothers counting food. Promises that hard work would lead somewhere. Promises that never came true. Piracy did not fix these injustices. Simply sidestepped them briefly. And that was enough. Imagine the deck under starlight. No lanterns burning. Just dark shapes and quiet breathing. The ship moves forward steady and patient. Somewhere beyond the horizon, empires argue over borders and laws. Out here none of that matters. For now the sea holds them. And for men who were never held by anything else, that feels like freedom. Morning came without ceremony. The sun lifted itself slowly from the water, pale at first, then sharp. Dew clung to rope and rail. Men stirred from sleep where they had dropped the night before. Joints stiff, mouths dry. Someone checked the horizon. Someone else stirred the embers of last night's fire to warm leftover food. This rhythm mattered. Routine kept fear manageable. Pirates lived with constant awareness of pursuit. Every unfamiliar sail tightened muscles. Every change in wind altered plans. They learned to read the sea the way farmers read clouds. A sudden silence of birds. A line on the horizon that did not move as waves did. These details saved lives. Contrary to later myths, pirates avoided killing whenever possible. Dead men invited revenge. Living witnesses often wanted nothing more than to reach port safely. Fear was a tool, but blood was a liability. When violence did happen, it was fast and ugly. There was no romance in it. Smoke burned the eyes. Splinters flew. Shouts collapsed into chaos. Afterwards, men moved quietly, cleaning decks, binding wounds, not speaking much. Survival left little room for celebration. Illness was a constant shadow. Scurvy twisted gums and loosened teeth. Infections spread quickly in damp spaces. Without doctors, crews relied on shared knowledge. Herbs, alcohol, crude surgery. Many had learned these skills not as pirates, but as neglected sailors forced to improvise. Death at sea was simple. A body wrapped in cloth. Few words. A weight tied to the feet. The splash, then nothing. No marker. No name carved anywhere permanent. The ocean remembered longer than people did. Yet morale mattered. Songs filled the air during long stretches. Not heroic ballads, but work songs, old folk tunes, and rough verses changed with each retelling. Music made labor lighter and time softer. Pirate democracy was imperfect but real. Votes were held. Grievances aired. Leadership shifted when trust broke. This flexibility kept ships alive. Rigid hierarchies snapped under pressure. Pirate crews bent. This adaptability came from experience under failed systems. Men had learned what did not work. They carried that knowledge with them. On land, poverty remained invisible to power. On ships, it was impossible to ignore. Every empty stomach, every injury, every exhaustion was shared. That closeness shaped behavior more than ideology ever could. Some pirates tried to justify their actions morally. They spoke of stealing from the rich, of striking back at empires built on slavery and exploitation. Others avoided such language. They did not need to believe they were good, only that they were alive. Both views existed on the same deck, sometimes in the same man. Imagine sitting against the mast, back warm from the sun, listening to water slide past the hull. For a moment, there is no chase, no hunger, no beating waiting at the end of the day. Just movement and breath. This was the quiet reward piracy offered. Not glory, not riches, just moments where life felt tolerable. And for men shaped by poverty, war, and forced obedience, that was more than they had ever been given. As seasons changed, the sea changed with them. Trade routes shifted. Storms grew stronger or quieter. Pirate crews followed these patterns carefully, because missing a season could mean missing survival. When ships were scarce, tension grew. Food ran lower. Arguments sharpened. Even fair systems strained under pressure. This was often when crews fractured. Some men wanted to push deeper into danger, chasing heavily guarded prizes. Others wanted to lie low, wait, preserve what they had. Votes decided, but votes did not erase fear. Men carried their own limits quietly, until they reached them. Desertion happened more often than stories admit. At friendly ports, a man might simply not return to the ship. Sometimes this was accepted. Sometimes it was punished. Trust was fragile when lives depended on everyone doing their part. Authorities understood this weakness and exploited it. Pardons were offered publicly. Notices promised forgiveness to those who surrendered. Some men believed them. Some had families waiting. Some were simply tired. A few pardons were honored. Many were not. Pirates who surrendered were sometimes imprisoned anyway, or forced into naval service once more. Word spread fast. Each betrayal hardened crews further, deepening the sense that the law existed only to trap them. The wider world continued to move. Plantations expanded. Slavery deepened. Wealth flowed upward. None of this eased the pressure that created pirates in the first place. If anything, it intensified it. Young men kept arriving at ports with no prospects. Wars flared again. Press gangs returned. The cycle renewed itself. Piracy was not a rebellion that failed. It was a symptom that kept returning because the cause remained untreated. Some pirates attempted settlements, dreaming of stable communities beyond imperial reach. These efforts rarely lasted. Lack of resources, internal conflict, and outside pressure crushed them. Empires did not tolerate alternatives. Aging pirates felt time closing in. Reflexes slowed. Injuries accumulated. Some hoped for one final haul, enough to disappear somewhere quiet. Many never got the chance. When capture came, it was often sudden. Faster ship. Betrayal. A calm morning broken by cannon fire. Resistance rarely changed the outcome. Survival instincts collided with reality. Imprisonment was short. Trials were swift. Executions were scheduled quickly. before public sympathy could grow. Authorities needed closure, not understanding. Yet even at the gallows, accounts describe pirates meeting death with calm that unsettled witnesses. Not bravery exactly, acceptance. Many had lived years longer than expected. Many had known since the beginning how it might end. Imagine standing among a crowd, watching such a moment. The condemned man looks ordinary, tired, sunburned. Not the monster pamphlets described. Just another laborer shaped by forces larger than himself. The rope tightens. The crowd exhales. Order feels restored. But somewhere, another young man walks the docks, hungry, unpaid, unwanted. The sea still waits. And so the story continues, not as legend, but as repetition. Life on board was never static. Each day brought new calculations. Where to sail. Which ports to avoid. Which merchant ships might carry enough goods to keep the crew fed and the ship seaworthy. Navigation was as much about risk assessment as it was about maps or stars. A wrong choice could mean capture, death, or months of hunger. The ocean demanded attention always. Pirates learned to watch for patterns. Merchant schedules. Navy patrols. Weather changes. Birds, clouds, the smell of salt and algae. Experience turned observation into instinct. The ordinary men who had no power on land now held knowledge that empires paid for. They became their own authorities in a small, dangerous world. The division of labor was strict, yet fluid. A man might climb the rigging one moment, then scrub the deck the next. Everyone learned multiple skills: navigation, gunnery, carpentry, basic medicine. Survival depended on adaptability. There was no room for specialization in boredom. There was only efficiency and necessity. Pirate crews were diverse. Englishmen, Scots, Irish, Africans, former enslaved people, even colonists who could not find work ashore. Common language and shared danger created a temporary equality, though prejudices did not vanish entirely. Still, in the crucible of survival, skill mattered more than skin or heritage. Men judged each other by usefulness rather than lineage. The threat of disease lingered. Dysentery, scurvy, infections, fevers. These claimed lives silently, more often than cannons did. Water was rationed. Food preserved. Crude hygiene and the constant motion of the ship mitigated illness only partially. Pirates learned which ports offered safer water, which herbs helped, and which behaviors prevented contamination. Knowledge became power. Life ashore was remembered with a mixture of longing and disdain. Ports were dangerous, full of debt collectors, press gangs, and officials eager to arrest or exploit. Taverns promised brief comfort but also brought fights, drunken mistakes, and betrayal. The ordinary men who became pirates had learned that land often punished survival rather than rewarded it. Yet the occasional shore leave carried fleeting joys. Fresh water, warm beds, human contact, laughter not forced by necessity. For a few days, pirates could remember what it meant to be alive outside fear. Then duty, opportunity, or pursuit called them back to the water. Piracy thrived on unpredictability. A calm day could turn to chaos in minutes. Enemy ships, storms, hidden reefs, or betrayal could end everything. Ordinary men became extraordinary not through choice, but through constant confrontation with risk. Their lives were measured in hours, not years. Letters from home were rare and precious. News of births, deaths, marriages, debts, reminders of the world left behind. Some men carried guilt for abandoning families. Some hoped to send spoils quietly. The emotional weight was ever present but unspoken. Silence saved sanity. The life of a pirate was paradoxical. Freedom existed, but only in the context of danger. Democracy existed, but only in small, temporary forms. Safety existed, but only in calculated risk. Ordinary men became pirates not because they wanted adventure, but because the world had left them no better option. They adapted, survived, and endured. And the ocean watched silently, indifferent to ambition or morality, measuring each man by how long he could stay afloat. The stories of treasure and daring rarely captured the daily grind. Most days were ordinary, measured in mundane, exhausting tasks. Sailors repaired sails with frayed edges, patched leaks before storms, cleaned decks slick with salt and fish. They cooked meals over open flames, rationed hard bread and salted meat, and kept watch through long, silent nights when the only sound was the gentle slap of waves against the hull. Yet it was these small, persistent labors that kept the ship alive, and the crew alive with it. Fear was constant but quiet. Not the dramatic fear of battle, but the slow, pressing awareness that at any moment, circumstances could shift. A cannonball, a hidden reef, a sudden disease, a betrayal by a crewmate. Ordinary men had learned to carry fear like a shadow, not denying it, not panicking, just surviving alongside it. That was their education, paid for in bruises, exhaustion, and scars. Some pirates remembered the days when they had served lawful navies. They recalled being whipped for minor mistakes, for questioning orders, or for failing to perform physically impossible tasks. The contrast between that abuse and the relatively fair treatment aboard pirate ships made the sea seem like a sanctuary. It was an imperfect one, yes, but a space where voice and skill mattered, and where injuries earned compensation instead of shame. Loot was never guaranteed. Even careful planning could be undone by weather, poor navigation, or deception. A man might spend weeks chasing a merchant ship only to find it empty or well defended. The disappointment weighed on crews, but it was part of survival. Experience taught them patience as much as skill. Pirate life demanded attention to small details. Navigation by sun and stars, recognizing distant sails, reading subtle changes in wind and waves. These men learned skills that would have taken years in any formal apprenticeship on land. Yet they did it while constantly balancing hunger, exhaustion, and the threat of death. Ordinary men became extraordinary out of necessity. The bond among crew members was intense, fragile, and functional. Trust had to be earned quickly. A man who failed to perform could endanger everyone. But those who proved themselves became indispensable. There was camaraderie born not from friendship, but from shared dependency. A subtle, ever-present thread running through their lives. Moral ambiguity was unavoidable. Pirates often attacked ships carrying goods stolen from innocent people, but the reality was more nuanced. Many targeted naval or merchant ships directly tied to empires that had oppressed them. They saw themselves as reclaiming what was denied. Still, not all were choosy, and the line between survival and crime blurred. Ordinary men adjusted their ethics to the practicalities of survival. Weather dictated the rhythm of life as much as leadership. Storms could scatter ships, destroy supplies, and drown men without warning. Calm seas prolonged waiting, with crews growing restless, sometimes turning small disagreements into fights. Every shift of wind had to be respected, every horizon watched. And through it all, these men maintained a fragile sense of autonomy. Pirates might not have known freedom in its fullest sense, but they had more of it than they had ever known ashore. They could speak, vote, and act in ways impossible in ports, barracks, or plantations. Picture the deck at night. Stars scattered across the sky like shattered glass. The gentle rocking of the ship beneath tired hands. Men lean quietly, listening, watching, waiting. Their thoughts are private but shaped by a shared understanding. Survival is temporary, but for now it exists. And that is all a man needs to keep going. Pirate ships were like floating microcosms of society, though one shaped entirely by necessity and risk. Ranks existed, but they were fluid and earned, not inherited. Captains were chosen for experience and judgment, quartermasters handled disputes, and ordinary sailors had a voice in decisions affecting their survival. Each man's opinion counted more than it would in a town ruled by magistrates or merchants. Democracy on deck was harsh and direct, but it worked because every vote could mean life or death. Daily life was repetitive yet unpredictable. The same chores returned: scrubbing decks, repairing sails, checking the rigging, cooking meals, rationing water and food. Yet danger could erupt at any moment. A passing ship could be an opportunity for riches, or the beginning of a firefight. Storms, disease, or betrayal were never far away. The ordinary man who became a pirate learned to measure every move, weigh every risk, and act decisively. Pirates were observant. They studied weather patterns, shipping schedules, tides, currents, and wind. Navigation was a skill honed through both formal learning, sometimes from previous naval service, and countless mistakes. A single miscalculation could strand a ship on a reef, or worse, sink it. Ordinary men became experts in survival, sometimes more skilled than those in the navies that had pressed them into service. The social dynamics aboard were equally complex. Conflicts flared over food, spoils, or perceived slights. Discipline was enforced, sometimes harshly, but fairness was valued. Theft from the crew, desertion during battle, or threats to authority could lead to marooning or death. These rules were not arbitrary. They were survival mechanisms. A pirate ship could not function if chaos dominated. Despite the danger, camaraderie flourished. Songs echoed across the decks during work, keeping rhythm and easing the labor. Stories were shared quietly at night, tales of home, lost loved ones, past voyages, or imagined fortunes. Humor and wit were tools for enduring hardship, and laughter became rare currency. The psychological toll was heavy. Constant vigilance, repeated exposure to death and violence, and the isolation of the sea weighed on men. Memories of failed crops, unpaid debts, broken families, and past abuse haunted them. Pirates adapted by focusing on the present, finding comfort in small victories. A repaired sail, a captured prize, or a day without injury. Piracy also offered glimpses of moral clarity and choice. Some attacked slave ships, freeing those aboard. Others avoided unnecessary bloodshed. Yet ethics were secondary to survival. Ordinary men could not afford idealism when hunger gnawed at their bellies or disease struck silently. Decisions were pragmatic. The sea rewarded those who acted decisively and punished hesitation. On board, diversity created both strength and tension. Men of different backgrounds, English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial, worked side by side. While prejudices lingered, shared dependence often outweighed social norms. Skill, courage, and reliability mattered more than origin. These temporary equalities were remarkable, though always fragile. The ocean itself was indifferent. It offered beauty and terror, calm and chaos. Pirates learned to respect its moods, understanding that the sea did not negotiate. The waves could be as lethal as any cannon. Weather dictated movement and opportunity, forcing careful observation and flexibility. Imagine a pirate standing on the quarterdeck under the morning sun, wind in hair, watching the horizon. Every decision matters. Every glance counts. Survival is measured in hours, not years. And yet, amidst the exhaustion, danger, and uncertainty, there is a fleeting sense of control, a rare and precious thing for men who had lived under endless oppression on land. Pirate life demanded constant vigilance, not only against enemies but against the sea itself. Every sound mattered. The creak of a mast, the splash of a wave too close to the hull, the whisper of wind across the rigging. Ordinary men, once unremarkable laborers on land, learned to read these signs instinctively. They noticed the smallest change that might indicate danger, an approaching ship, a storm gathering, or a hidden reef waiting to claim them. Survival depended on attention. One misstep could be fatal. Hunger, fatigue, and injury were companions always present. Meals were basic. Salted meat, hard bread, sometimes fish caught from the side of the ship. Fresh water was rationed, and the threat of scurvy lurked on long voyages. Wounds healed slowly, if at all, with crude medical knowledge. Still, pirate crews adapted, sharing remedies, learning from mistakes, and passing knowledge from one sailor to another. Ordinary men became skilled in improvisation, mastering survival skills that would have been impossible on land. Discipline on a pirate ship was pragmatic. Rules existed to ensure the safety of all, not to reinforce authority. Stealing from a crewmate, deserting in battle, or threatening the chain of command could result in severe punishment, sometimes marooning, sometimes death. These rules were not cruel for cruelty's sake, but necessary. A ship could not function if fear or chaos ruled unchecked. Each man's survival depended on the cooperation of others. Trust was fragile but vital. Crews bonded over shared hardships, victories, and narrow escapes. They relied on one another in ways unimaginable on land, where social hierarchy and corruption often undermined human connection. Loyalty was earned through competence, courage, and reliability. Even small acts like passing water to a fellow sailor or lending a hand during a storm reinforced the fabric of survival. Ordinary men discovered a form of agency they had never known, where their value was measured by action rather than birth or wealth. At night, the sea revealed a quieter side. Men would lean against the railing, listening to the water, watching stars reflected on the waves. Some whispered about home, others sang softly, and a few stared into the darkness, contemplating the life they had left behind. Memory of poverty, broken families, and forced labor lingered, reminding them why they had chosen this perilous path. Pirates lived in contrast to the lands they had fled, where opportunity had been denied and justice had been absent. Yet danger was always present. The authorities hunted pirates relentlessly. Naval vessels patrolled known pirate routes, often with overwhelming force. Betrayal by informants, former friends, or even fellow sailors was common. News of executions traveled quickly. The rope, the gallows, the display of bodies, all served to instill fear and discourage new recruits. Ordinary men understood that the law did not protect them and that survival depended on cunning, caution, and sometimes sheer luck. Pirates also faced moral contradictions. Some attacked slave ships, freeing those aboard. Others preyed on vessels carrying essential goods for the poor. Ethics were subordinate to survival, but choices were rarely absent. Each decision reflected a balance between immediate need and long-term consequences, a constant weighing of risk and reward. Time became a peculiar concept aboard ship. Days were structured by work, watch shifts, and the movement of the sun. Weeks passed with little change except for the position of the stars. Men measured life not by age or seasons, but by distance sailed and dangers survived. Ordinary men became masters of patience, endurance, and focus, qualities honed in circumstances few on land could comprehend. Imagine standing on deck during a dawn mist. The horizon is pale and quiet. The water is a slow rhythm beneath your feet. Every breath is sharp with salt, every movement calculated. The world on land, with its hunger, taxes, and oppression, feels far away. Out here, in constant confrontation with life and death, ordinary men become capable, aware, and unafraid in ways they could never have imagined before. Life aboard a pirate ship demanded both endurance and calculation. Each day began with the low murmur of the sea and the creaking of the vessel. Ordinary men, hardened by years of neglect, abuse, and labor on land, now found themselves in a world where their actions had immediate consequences. Every rope tied, every sail adjusted, every lookout's warning mattered. Mistakes could sink a ship, drown a man, or provoke an enemy's cannon fire. Ordinary men learned the value of vigilance, patience, and skill in ways their former lives never required. Hunger was a persistent companion. Salted meat, hard bread, and the occasional fresh catch provided meager sustenance. Fresh water was rationed carefully, often mixed with alcohol to prevent disease. Scurvy claimed many who did not take precautions. Illness was a slow predator, spreading quietly through crowded decks. Pirates became their own doctors, improvising treatments from herbs, alcohol, and limited knowledge. Ordinary men who had never been responsible for life beyond themselves suddenly became indispensable to the survival of the crew. Discipline was strict but pragmatic. Theft, desertion, or insubordination could result in marooning, flogging, or execution. Yet the structure was not arbitrary. Rules existed to preserve the collective safety. Each man's survival depended on cooperation. A pirate ship could not function on fear alone. Fairness, predictability, and shared responsibility were essential. Ordinary men learned quickly that loyalty and skill mattered far more than rank or wealth. The social fabric of the crew was complex. Sailors hailed from England, Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and the Americas. Differences in language, culture, and background existed, but they were tempered by shared reliance and danger. Skill, courage, and reliability were valued over birthright or social status. This temporary equality created a sense of agency and community that ordinary men had rarely experienced on land. Navigational skill was critical. Men read the stars, tides, winds, and currents. They memorized trade routes, studied naval patrol schedules, and learned to anticipate storms. Knowledge of the sea became power, and ordinary men who had once been powerless now held expertise that empires paid dearly for. They moved with awareness, intuition, and cunning that defied their humble beginnings. The threat of capture or death was never distant. Naval ships patrolled known pirate waters, and governments offered pardons to divide crews. Informants betrayed trust. Even friends could turn into enemies. Ordinary men lived in a constant state of alert, balancing fear with calculated risk. Survival was not about courage alone, but about observation, timing, and decision-making. Piracy offered small freedoms within extreme constraints. Captains were chosen for skill, not status. Crews voted on important matters. Injuries were compensated. Voice and action carried weight. Ordinary men who had been invisible on land discovered influence aboard ship. Yet freedom came with constant negotiation, risk, and moral ambiguity. Pirates often targeted ships linked to empires that oppressed them, but at times, necessity forced attacks on neutral or essential trade. Ethics were intertwined with survival, never simple. Night brought both reflection and tension. Stars above, dark waves below. Men whispered about families left behind, plotted future attacks, or simply listened to the quiet rhythm of the sea. Every moment of calm was precious, a brief reprieve from relentless danger. Ordinary men cherished these fleeting moments of agency, even as they anticipated the storms, literal and metaphorical, that were certain to come. Imagine standing on the deck at dusk. The wind stirs the hair. Salt clings to skin. The horizon stretches empty and infinite. Every sense is engaged. Ordinary men feel the sea beneath their feet, the sky above, and the weight of survival pressing on every decision. Out here, in constant engagement with life and death, they are not heroes or criminals. They are survivors, shaped and defined by the forces that sought to break them. Pirates existed in a world defined by scarcity, danger, and opportunity. Every day required calculation and endurance. Ordinary men, long oppressed on land, had to learn to read the subtle cues of the ocean. Changes in wind direction, the distant glint of sails, the movement of birds signaling nearby land. These small observations often determined life or death. Mistakes were unforgiving, but each successful adjustment reinforced confidence and skill. Men who had once been powerless became vital to the survival of the crew and the ship. Rations shaped behavior. Salted meat, hardtack, and the occasional fresh catch were shared carefully. Water was precious, and spoiling was a constant threat. Scurvy and other illnesses were ever-present dangers, taking men quietly but relentlessly. Pirates developed crude medical practices. Herbs, alcohol, and improvisation kept men alive when professional care was unavailable. Ordinary men adapted, gaining knowledge and responsibility far beyond what their previous lives demanded. Authority aboard ship was functional rather than absolute. Captains were chosen for competence and experience. Quartermasters handled disputes, and votes settled disagreements. Discipline was strict but consistent. Theft, desertion, or betrayal could lead to marooning or death, but the rules were transparent. Fairness was survival. Ordinary men who had suffered arbitrary punishments ashore now experienced justice based on practicality, rather than privilege or birth. The social dynamics were complex and fragile. Crews were diverse. English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial men worked side by side. Skills and reliability mattered more than origin. Trust was earned through consistent performance and courage. Loyalty was both essential and conditional, dependent on each man's actions. Ordinary men discovered respect and influence in ways impossible on land. The ocean dictated life. Storms were deadly, unpredictable, and sudden. Calm seas were deceptive, lulling men into a false sense of security. Navigation required constant observation, understanding currents, tides, and trade routes. Ordinary men developed intuition and expertise that often surpassed formal naval training. Knowledge of the sea became both power and protection. Piracy involved moral ambiguity. Some attacked ships linked to empires, reclaiming resources in a world that had denied them justice. Others targeted neutral or even poor vessels, driven by survival. Ethics were intertwined with necessity, not idealism. Ordinary men adapted to this reality, understanding that survival sometimes required difficult choices, and that consequence was inevitable. Isolation shaped psychology. Weeks or months at sea created a strange temporal world. Days were measured by work, watches, and weather. Nights offered quiet reflection, memories of families, homes, and the poverty left behind. Moments of calm allowed men to breathe, though they knew danger could return at any moment. Ordinary men balanced fear and vigilance constantly, learning patience, endurance, and focus. The hunt for survival demanded observation and action. Pirates watched for naval patrols, rival crews, storms, and hidden reefs. Every decision, no matter how minor, carried weight. The sea offered no forgiveness. Ordinary men learned that adaptability, skill, and unity were often more important than courage or luck alone. Each successful voyage reinforced experience, confidence, and the delicate balance of life at sea. Imagine standing on the quarterdeck under moonlight. Waves lap against the hull. Stars reflect on the water. The wind brushes your face. Every sense is heightened. Choice matters. Ordinary men, shaped by hunger, war, and oppression, now command their own survival. Here on the indifferent ocean, freedom exists in action, calculation, and the ability to endure. The daily rhythm aboard pirate ships was a strange mixture of monotony and urgency. Ordinary men, once laborers, farmers, or indentured workers, now faced a life where every movement had consequence. Dawn brought inspection and repair. Sails mended, ropes coiled, hulls scrubbed. Meals were prepared over open flames. Hardtack softened in water, salted meat boiled in kettles. Water rationed carefully. Rum mixed to reduce sickness. Hygiene was minimal, yet every small precaution mattered. Survival required constant attention, and ordinary men learned quickly which efforts mattered most. The threat of disease was omnipresent. Dysentery, fevers, scurvy, and infections were common. Without professional medical care, pirates relied on crude remedies and shared knowledge. Alcohol served as both medicine and preservative. Herbs and simple techniques provided relief. Men learned these skills quickly, for mistakes could be fatal. Ordinary men who had never been trusted with responsibility now became vital caretakers for themselves and each other. Authority was functional, not symbolic. Captains were elected or recognized for experience, skill, and leadership. Quartermasters handled disputes and represented the crew's interests. Votes were held for major decisions. Punishments existed for theft, betrayal, or desertion, but fairness was essential. On a pirate ship, trust and reliability were currency. Ordinary men found influence in ways impossible ashore, where social class and birth had defined opportunity. Pirate crews were diverse, often composed of men from England, Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and the colonies. While prejudices persisted, shared risk demanded cooperation. Skill and reliability outweighed origin or race. Temporary equality was practical. The ship could not function without every man performing his duties. Ordinary men experienced authority and recognition denied to them in their previous lives. Navigation and awareness were crucial. Understanding currents, tides, trade routes, and weather patterns was a matter of survival. Storms could strike without warning. Calm seas could lull a crew into complacency. Ordinary men developed intuition, observation skills, and decision-making abilities that often surpassed those trained in formal naval service. Knowledge became both a weapon and a shield. Moral ambiguity accompanied necessity. Pirates attacked ships linked to oppressive empires, sometimes targeting neutral or even essential goods when survival demanded it. Ethics were subordinate to practicality. Decisions were made in real time, weighed against hunger, risk, and opportunity. Ordinary men adapted, balancing conscience with pragmatism. Night brought both quiet and tension. Stars reflected on dark waters. Crewmates whispered of home, memories of hardship, or plans for the future. Some sang softly to mark time, to ease fatigue, or to remember life ashore. Sleep was intermittent, punctuated by watches. Men learned to rest lightly, aware that danger could erupt at any hour. Piracy existed in a fragile equilibrium between freedom and danger. Each act, from adjusting a sail to plotting an attack, carried consequences. Ordinary men, drawn into this life by poverty, war, and survival, became experts in resilience, resourcefulness, and adaptability. They learned that freedom on the sea was temporary and contingent, but precious nonetheless. Imagine standing on deck at first light. Fog drifts over the water. The ship creaks with every swell. Salt lingers in the air. Every glance toward the horizon carries questions. Friend or enemy? Storm or calm? Each breath is measured, each movement deliberate. Ordinary men, once powerless, now hold command over their survival, guided by knowledge, experience, and instinct. The ocean, indifferent and infinite, watches them closely. The life of a pirate was as much about endurance as it was about opportunity. Days blended together, punctuated by the constant demands of the sea. Ordinary men, once shaped by rigid labor or forced service, now learned to manage exhaustion, hunger, and the ever-present risk of injury. Tasks repeated endlessly. Repairing sails, scrubbing decks, checking rigging, cooking meals, and rationing water. Small errors could have deadly consequences, and men adapted quickly. Their bodies became strong, their hands skilled, their awareness sharpened by necessity. The threat of disease was constant and silent. Scurvy, dysentery, and fevers claimed men slowly and unpredictably. With no formal medical care, crews relied on improvisation. Alcohol, herbs, and crude surgical techniques kept sailors alive. Ordinary men, many of whom had never managed responsibility beyond themselves, became caregivers, teachers, and learners simultaneously. Knowledge and vigilance were survival tools, passed hand to hand among the crew. Authority aboard ship was a delicate balance. Captains were elected or recognized for ability rather than birth. Quartermasters represented the crew and enforced fairness. Punishments existed but were transparent and justified. Theft, desertion, or insubordination threatened all. Ordinary men learned quickly that compliance, competence, and trust were more valuable than obedience alone. Decisions were practical, often life-saving, and rarely arbitrary. Pirate crews were diverse. Men came from England, Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and colonial settlements. Differences in language, background, and culture existed, yet shared survival and reliance often outweighed prejudice. Skill and courage mattered more than origin. Temporary equality emerged not from ideology, but necessity. The ship could not survive without every man contributing effectively. Navigation required constant attention. Currents, winds, tides, and trade routes were studied and memorized. Storms could arise without warning. Calm seas were deceptive, offering time for repair but also the risk of complacency. Ordinary men became experts in observation, prediction, and swift action. Knowledge of the sea became a form of power and a shield against the relentless dangers of their life. Moral ambiguity was unavoidable. Pirates sometimes attacked enemy ships, sometimes neutral vessels, sometimes ships carrying essential supplies. Ethics were subordinate to survival. Ordinary men adapted to the reality that choices were rarely simple. Every decision carried risk and consequence. They learned to weigh actions against immediate need, long-term survival, and the fragile balance of their community. Night brought a different rhythm. Men leaned against the railing, listening to the gentle slap of waves, whispering about family left behind, singing soft work songs, or reflecting quietly on past hardships. Sleep was intermittent, punctuated by watch shifts and the subtle alerts of danger. Men became attuned to sound, movement, and light, learning to detect threats and opportunities instinctively. The sea was both liberating and unforgiving. It offered moments of autonomy unseen on land, where class, wealth, and privilege had dictated life. Yet freedom came with constant vigilance, skill, and cooperation. Ordinary men who had once been trapped by poverty, war, or oppression now found a rare sense of agency, but always within the context of extreme risk. Imagine standing at the prow during a sunrise. The sky shifts from gray to gold. The waves sparkle, indifferent to struggle. Every sound, every shadow, every ripple carries meaning. Ordinary men, shaped by deprivation and survival, now navigate life and death on their own terms. The ocean measures them, tests them, and, in rare moments, rewards them with calm and control. Pirates learned quickly that survival depended as much on foresight as on strength. Every day required decisions that balanced risk and reward. Ordinary men, who had once labored under systems that offered no choice, now navigated a world where each action mattered. Should they attack a distant ship with a potentially valuable cargo, or avoid confrontation with a vessel that might outgun them? Every choice carried weight, and the sea offered no second chances. Mistakes could mean drowning, capture, or death in battle. Rations were tightly managed. Hardtack, salted meat, and occasional fish made up most meals. Water was precious, often diluted with alcohol to prevent illness. Pirates learned to recognize the early signs of scurvy, dysentery, or fevers. Crude remedies, careful rationing, and shared knowledge kept many alive. Ordinary men who had previously lacked responsibility found themselves suddenly indispensable to the welfare of their peers. Discipline maintained order on a ship constantly teetering between survival and chaos. Captains were elected, and leadership depended on skill, judgment, and respect. Quartermasters represented the crew and ensured fairness in disputes. Punishments were practical. Theft, desertion, or threats to order could lead to marooning or death. Ordinary men discovered that competence and reliability could outweigh social standing or past hardships. Diversity was a defining characteristic of pirate crews. Men from England, Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and the Americas worked side by side. While prejudice persisted, necessity demanded cooperation. Skill, courage, and loyalty mattered more than background. Temporary equality emerged, not from idealism, but from practicality. The ship could not function without every man contributing. Navigation was constant, detailed work. Reading the stars, currents, wind, and tide allowed pirates to plot routes that maximized opportunity and minimized risk. Storms could strike without warning, and calm seas required vigilance to prevent accidents or ambushes. Ordinary men became adept at observation, predicting danger, and making split-second decisions. Knowledge became a tool for survival and influence. Pirates faced moral ambiguity daily. They attacked ships tied to empires or commerce, sometimes neutral vessels, sometimes those carrying essential goods. Ethics were subordinate to survival. Ordinary men adapted, weighing each action against necessity, consequences, and the fragile social cohesion of the crew. Night brought a pause but not rest. Crews kept watch in shifts. Men whispered of family left behind, recounted past hardships, or quietly plotted future raids. Songs marked the passage of time, easing fatigue and reminding men of humanity amid danger. Sleep was shallow, interrupted by the need to respond to subtle changes on deck. The sea demanded respect. It offered freedom, but only to those willing to endure its trials. Ordinary men who had once been invisible, powerless, or exploited learned to rely on themselves and each other. They discovered agency in movement, knowledge, and cooperation. The ocean became both adversary and teacher, measuring every skill, every choice, and every moment of courage. Imagine standing at the stern, watching the horizon in early dawn light. Waves shimmer, indifferent to effort or ambition. The wind carries both promise and threat. Every sound and movement commands attention. Ordinary men, hardened by oppression and necessity, now navigate survival with skill and instinct. Here on the vast and impartial sea, life is theirs to direct, moment by moment, decision by decision. The reality of pirate life was built on a mixture of routine and constant alertness. Ordinary men, forced into a life of hardship on land, had to adjust quickly to a world where every misstep could be fatal. Dawn brought inspection of sails and rigging, repairs to the hull, preparation of meals, and rationing of precious water. Small errors were costly. A rope frayed, a sail untied, or a misread tide could result in disaster. Men adapted, honing skill and attention until instinct guided their actions. Illness was a constant threat. Scurvy, fevers, dysentery, and infections stalked the crew silently. Pirates had no doctors, no hospitals, only improvised remedies. Herbs, alcohol, and knowledge passed from one man to another. Ordinary men learned to care for themselves and others, turning necessity into expertise. Survival depended on the health of the group as much as individual ability. Discipline was structured around practicality. Captains were chosen for skill, judgment, and respect, not birth or wealth. Quartermasters enforced fairness, settled disputes, and ensured rules were upheld. Theft, desertion, or insubordination could result in marooning or death, but punishment was consistent and transparent. Ordinary men discovered that competence and loyalty were more valuable than social standing, and that fair rules could preserve life and trust aboard ship. Pirate crews were diverse, often including English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial men. Differences existed, yet the necessity of survival required cooperation. Skill and courage outweighed origin. Temporary equality emerged naturally. The ship could not function if any man failed in his duties. Ordinary men found a sense of agency and respect denied to them in their previous lives. Navigation was constant and exacting. Currents, winds, tides, and trade routes dictated movement. Storms could arise without warning. Calm seas demanded attention to avoid complacency. Ordinary men became skilled observers and decision-makers, using experience and intuition to predict danger and opportunity. Knowledge of the sea became a form of power, a shield against the unpredictability of life on the ocean. Moral ambiguity was inherent. Pirates attacked ships of empires, sometimes neutral vessels, occasionally essential cargo. Survival dictated choices more than conscience. Ordinary men learned to weigh immediate needs against potential consequences, balancing pragmatism with limited ethics. Life was about maintaining the fragile equilibrium of the crew, the ship, and the unpredictable ocean. Nighttime offered brief respite but not safety. Men kept watch in shifts, listening to the water, whispering about family, sharing memories, and singing soft-work songs. Sleep was light. Vigilance never relaxed completely. Ordinary men developed acute senses, attuned to slightest sounds, shadows, or movements that might signal danger. Awareness became second nature, instinct replacing conscious thought. The sea was a teacher, indifferent yet instructive. It demanded endurance, skill, cooperation, and constant adaptation. Ordinary men, shaped by deprivation and survival, discovered agency, resilience, and competence. They learned to balance fear and action, freedom and risk, morality and necessity. The ocean judged all equally, indifferent to ambition or suffering, rewarding those who understood its rules and punishing those who did not. Imagine standing on deck as the sun dips toward the horizon. The water glows faintly gold. The wind carries both salt and possibility. Each breath is deliberate, each movement measured. Ordinary men, once powerless, now navigate survival, mastery, and judgment in a world defined by the vast and impartial ocean. For them, the sea is freedom, danger, and teacher, all at once. Pirate life thrived on observation, adaptability, and a keen understanding of human behavior. Ordinary men, forced into oppression and poverty on land, learned quickly that survival depended as much on wit as on strength. Every creak of wood, flutter of sail, or distant glint on the horizon held potential meaning. Mistakes could sink a ship, provoke a naval engagement, or lead to starvation. Men developed instincts honed over months and years, noticing subtleties that would escape ordinary eyes ashore. Rations and supplies dictated daily rhythms. Salted meat, hardtack, occasional fish, and rationed water sustained crews for long stretches. Alcohol diluted water, warding off illness but never eliminating the danger. Scurvy and fevers lurked quietly, claiming men silently. Pirates learned to improvise. Herbs, boiling water, and crude treatments were deployed to keep men alive. Ordinary men gained expertise in areas previously denied to them, becoming caretakers, healers, and educators for one another. Discipline remained pragmatic. Captains led by ability and experience. Quartermasters ensured fairness in disputes and distribution of loot. Theft, desertion, or threats to the chain of command could mean marooning or death. Ordinary men understood that competence, reliability, and loyalty mattered more than wealth or birth. The ship's survival depended on predictable and enforceable rules, not ideology. Pirate crews were diverse. Men from England, Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and the colonies sailed together. Cultural differences persisted, but survival required cooperation. Skill, courage, and consistency mattered above all. Temporary equality was practical. The ship could not function if any man failed in his duties. Ordinary men discovered autonomy and respect in ways impossible ashore, where social hierarchy dictated opportunity. Navigation was relentless and precise. Currents, tides, trade routes, and weather patterns dictated action. Storms could arrive without warning. Calm seas demanded careful observation and attention to prevent accidents or ambushes. Ordinary men developed deep knowledge, predicting danger and opportunity with intuition and experience. Knowledge became both power and protection. Moral ambiguity permeated life at sea. Pirates attacked ships tied to empires, sometimes neutral vessels, occasionally carrying essential goods. Ethics bowed to survival. Ordinary men learned to weigh necessity, consequence, and crew cohesion with every decision. Survival was a constant balance, requiring pragmatism, vigilance, and cooperation. Night offered limited comfort. Men kept watch in shifts, whispered of family and past hardships, shared stories, or sang quietly to pass the time. Sleep was light and fragmented. Men attuned their senses to subtle sounds, movements, and light, building instinctual awareness. Ordinary men, previously powerless, learned to read the world around them with extraordinary acuity. The sea, vast and indifferent, offered freedom, challenge, and education. Ordinary men discovered agency in action, skill, and shared survival. They navigated fear and opportunity, morality and necessity, danger and endurance. The ocean rewarded those who adapted, punished those who did not, and remained indifferent to ambition or suffering. Picture standing on deck beneath a sky fading from blue to deep indigo. The ship rocks gently, salt-laden wind brushing skin. Every sound, movement, and ripple carries meaning. Ordinary men, shaped by hardship and necessity, navigate a world defined by risk, skill, and survival. Here, freedom is earned, danger is constant, and the sea teaches every lesson relentlessly. The life of a pirate was a constant negotiation between danger, skill, and fleeting comfort. Ordinary men, driven to the sea by poverty, war, and oppression, discovered that survival required relentless attention to detail. Every day demanded physical labor. Repairing sails torn by wind, scrubbing decks slick with salt and fish, checking ropes and rigging, preparing meals over open flames, and rationing the precious supply of water. The ocean punished mistakes swiftly. A misread tide, an unnoticed reef, or a delayed lookout could destroy ship and crew. Ordinary men learned quickly to balance patience, awareness, and action. Illness stalked the crew invisibly. Scurvy, fevers, and dysentery claimed lives slowly and mercilessly. Pirates had no doctors, no hospitals, only their wits, knowledge passed hand to hand, and crude remedies. Alcohol and herbs were tools of survival. Ordinary men became healers, caretakers, and educators in an environment where knowledge and attention meant life itself. Each successful recovery reinforced their role and authority on board. Discipline was functional, designed to maintain life, not to assert dominance. Captains were elected for experience, judgment, and respect, not noble birth. Quartermasters ensured fairness and mediated disputes. Theft, desertion, or insubordination could result in marooning or execution. Ordinary men understood quickly that competence, reliability, and trust mattered more than prior status. Survival depended on predictable, enforceable rules. Pirate crews were diverse, including English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial men. Differences in culture and language existed, but survival demanded cooperation. Skill, bravery, and consistency determined respect. Temporary equality emerged from necessity. Each man's contribution mattered for the safety and success of the ship. Ordinary men discovered agency and influence in ways that had been impossible ashore. Navigation was relentless. Currents, tides, winds, and the movements of trade ships were constantly observed. Storms could arrive without warning, while calm seas required vigilance to avoid ambushes or navigational errors. Ordinary men became experts in observation and prediction, honing intuition and technical skill alike. Knowledge of the ocean became power, offering protection and opportunity. Moral ambiguity was constant. Pirates attacked ships tied to empires, neutral vessels, and sometimes cargo essential to the poor. Ethics were guided by survival, pragmatism, and the needs of the crew. Ordinary men weighed consequences, risk, and necessity with every decision. Every choice mattered. The wrong move could end a voyage or cost lives. Night brought quiet reflection amid danger. Watch shifts were observed. Whispered memories of family and past hardship were shared, and soft songs marked the passage of time. Sleep was light, interrupted, and brief. Men honed their senses to detect the slightest sound, movement, or light. Ordinary men, once powerless, developed an acute awareness that defined their ability to survive. The sea was indifferent, vast, and relentless. It demanded skill, cooperation, and endurance, yet it offered moments of freedom, agency, and fleeting tranquility. Ordinary men, forged by deprivation and necessity, discovered competence, resilience, and autonomy. They learned to navigate fear and opportunity, danger and morality, endurance and fleeting comfort. Picture standing on deck as night settles over the waves. Stars sparkle faintly on the dark water. The ship creaks, the wind shifts, and each ripple carries a subtle warning. Ordinary men, shaped by poverty and oppression, now command their survival with skill, observation, and instinct. The sea measures every choice, every movement, every breath. Here, freedom exists not as law or privilege, but as endurance, decision, and attention. Pirate life was as much about mental endurance as it was physical. Ordinary men, driven to the sea by poverty, war, and oppression, learned that survival depended on constant attention and quick decision-making. Dawn brought chores that seemed mundane but were critical. Repairing sails frayed by wind, tightening rigging, scrubbing decks, preparing meager meals, and rationing precious water. Even minor oversights could have disastrous consequences. Men adapted, their bodies growing strong, their hands skilled, their minds alert to every sound, shadow, and movement around them. Disease was a quiet but ever-present danger. Scurvy, fevers, dysentery, and infections could claim lives slowly and silently. Without formal medical care, pirates relied on crude remedies. Alcohol, herbs, and shared knowledge passed from one sailor to another. Ordinary men became healers, caregivers, and improvisers, learning skills that would have been denied to them ashore. Knowledge of illness became as crucial as knowledge of navigation. Discipline aboard ship was pragmatic. Captains were chosen for skill and judgment, not social standing. Quartermasters mediated disputes and represented the crew, enforcing fairness. Theft, desertion, or threats to authority could result in marooning or death. Ordinary men learned that reliability, competence, and trust were more valuable than rank or wealth. Survival demanded order, yet fairness maintained loyalty and cohesion. Crews were diverse, reflecting the world they had escaped. English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial men shared labor and danger. While cultural differences persisted, skill and courage outweighed prejudice. Temporary equality emerged out of necessity. The ship could not survive if any man failed in his duty. Ordinary men found a sense of agency and respect previously denied to them. Navigation required constant observation. Currents, tides, winds, and the movement of trade ships dictated decisions. Storms could appear without warning, while calm seas demanded vigilance to avoid ambush or accident. Ordinary men became masters of observation, prediction, and rapid decision-making. Knowledge of the ocean became a form of protection and empowerment. Moral ambiguity was a constant reality. Pirates attacked ships of empires, sometimes neutral or essential vessels. Ethics were subordinate to survival, and ordinary men learned to balance pragmatism with consequences. Every choice could affect not only their lives but the cohesion and safety of the crew. Night brought brief reprieve but no complete rest. Watch shifts continued. Whispered conversations recalled family and past hardship, and soft songs marked time. Sleep was light, vigilance maintained. Men tuned their senses to subtle sounds and movements, refining instinct and awareness. Ordinary men, once powerless, developed remarkable perception and resilience. The ocean remained a stern, impartial teacher. It offered freedom and agency, but only to those willing to endure its trials. Ordinary men, shaped by deprivation, found autonomy, skill, and resilience. They learned to navigate danger, morality, and endurance simultaneously, recognizing that survival required attention, action, and cooperation. Imagine standing on deck at the edge of twilight. The sea shimmers faintly. The wind carries the scent of salt and possibility. Every sound and ripple matters. Ordinary men, molded by hardship and necessity, now command their survival through skill, observation, and instinct. Here, freedom is earned, danger is constant, and the ocean teaches its relentless lessons. Pirate life demanded constant vigilance and resilience, qualities ordinary men rarely had the chance to develop on land. From the first light of dawn, the ship stirred with activity. Men climbed the rigging to inspect sails, repaired frayed ropes, scrubbed decks, prepared meals over open fires, and rationed precious water supplies. Every action carried weight. A single oversight could damage the ship, endanger the crew, or invite disaster from a passing enemy vessel. Ordinary men learned quickly to translate observation and experience into instinct. Every creak, shadow, and glint on the horizon became a signal to interpret and act upon. Illness remained an invisible threat, stalking quietly yet persistently. Scurvy, fevers, dysentery, and infections claimed lives slowly. Pirate crews had no doctors or hospitals, only crude remedies. Herbs, alcohol, and shared knowledge passed from sailor to sailor. Ordinary men became caretakers, improvisers, and teachers, understanding that life depended as much on health as on skill or courage. Knowledge became a tool of survival, earned through necessity and observation. Discipline aboard ship was based on practicality. Captains were chosen for skill, experience, and judgment, not social class. Quartermasters enforced fairness, mediated disputes, and ensured adherence to rules. Theft, desertion, or insubordination could mean marooning or death. Ordinary men discovered that competence and reliability outweighed rank, wealth, or birthright. Survival demanded predictable and fair rules, without which chaos would quickly destroy the crew. Pirate crews were diverse. English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial men worked side by side. Differences in language, culture, and experience existed, yet survival required cooperation. Skill and courage outweighed prejudice, and temporary equality emerged naturally. Every man's contribution mattered, and ordinary men experienced influence and agency that had been denied to them ashore. Navigation demanded constant attention. Currents, tides, trade routes, and weather patterns dictated every move. Storms could arrive without warning. Calm seas required vigilance to prevent mistakes or ambushes. Ordinary men became skilled in observation, prediction, and rapid decision-making. Knowledge of the sea became both power and protection, offering opportunities that might never have existed on land. Moral ambiguity was unavoidable. Pirates attacked ships tied to empires, sometimes neutral or even necessary for survival of others. Ethics bowed to necessity. Ordinary men balanced pragmatism with conscience, understanding that every decision had consequences for themselves, the crew, and the fragile micro-society aboard ship. Night brought a pause but not safety. Watch shifts continued. Men whispered of families left behind, shared stories, or sang soft songs to mark the hours. Sleep was fragmented and shallow. Ordinary men honed their senses to detect the slightest change in sound, movement, or light, creating an instinctive awareness critical to survival. The ocean remained indifferent, vast, and relentless. It demanded skill, vigilance, and cooperation, but offered moments of freedom, agency, and fleeting beauty. Ordinary men, forged by poverty, oppression, and survival, discovered competence, resilience, and autonomy. They navigated fear, danger, morality, and endurance, learning lessons impossible to acquire on land. Picture standing on deck as twilight settles. The water glimmers, wind carries salt and promise. Every sound, movement, and ripple carries meaning. Ordinary men, once powerless, now navigate a world defined by survival, skill, and instinct. The sea measures every breath, every choice, every action, rewarding adaptation and punishing neglect. Here, freedom is earned, and life is lived in every moment of vigilance. The rhythm of pirate life was a delicate balance of monotony, vigilance, and fleeting opportunity. Ordinary men, who had once labored under oppressive conditions on land, discovered that the sea demanded constant attention and adaptability. Dawn brought the same essential tasks: inspecting sails, repairing rigging, scrubbing decks, preparing meager meals, and rationing water. Each action, no matter how small, carried potential consequences. A frayed rope, a missed knot, or a poorly read tide could destroy a ship or cost lives. Men adapted quickly, learning to trust experience and instinct over hesitation. Disease shadowed the crew. Scurvy, dysentery, fevers, and infections lurked quietly, claiming lives without warning. Pirates had no professional medical care, only crude remedies, herbs, and alcohol. Ordinary men became caretakers and improvised healers. Survival required knowledge, attention, and cooperation. Each successful recovery strengthened trust and reinforced the value of practical wisdom aboard the ship. Discipline was consistent and functional. Captains were chosen for skill, judgment, and experience. Quartermasters enforced rules, mediated disputes, and represented the crew. Theft, desertion, or threats to authority could result in severe punishment, often marooning or death. Ordinary men learned that reliability, competence, and loyalty were more valuable than rank, birth, or wealth. Order was maintained through fairness and necessity, not intimidation. Pirate crews were diverse, often consisting of men from England, Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and the colonies. Cultural differences persisted, yet the demands of survival forged cooperation. Skill, courage, and trust mattered more than origin. Temporary equality emerged as a practical necessity. The ship could not operate if any individual failed to contribute. Ordinary men discovered a sense of agency previously denied to them ashore. Navigation required continuous attention and learning. Currents, tides, winds, and trade routes shaped every choice. Storms could strike without warning, while calm seas demanded vigilance against error or ambush. Ordinary men became adept at observation, intuition, and decision-making. Knowledge of the ocean became both power and protection, offering opportunities to those who understood it. Moral ambiguity was a constant reality. Pirates attacked enemy ships, occasionally neutral or necessary trade, often guided by survival rather than principle. Ordinary men learned to balance pragmatism with ethical considerations, weighing consequences for themselves and the crew. Every action mattered, shaping the fragile social ecosystem aboard ship. Nighttime brought quiet reflection amid vigilance. Watch shifts continued, whispered memories of home and family persisted, and soft songs marked the passage of time. Sleep was fragmented and light, training men to notice subtle changes in the environment. Ordinary men, previously powerless, developed acute awareness and instinct essential for survival. The sea remained both teacher and judge, indifferent to suffering and ambition. It offered freedom, autonomy, and agency, yet demanded skill, cooperation, and endurance. Ordinary men, forged in adversity, learned resilience, competence, and adaptability. They navigated danger, morality, and survival simultaneously, understanding that life on the ocean was earned moment by moment. Imagine standing on deck at dusk. The horizon glows faintly orange. The wind carries salt and the promise of possibility. Every wave, shadow, and sound holds meaning. Ordinary men, once oppressed and powerless, now navigate a world defined by survival, skill, and instinct. The ocean watches impartially, rewarding attention, experience, and courage, and punishing inattention or error. Here freedom is not given. It is earned in each decision, each breath, each movement. Pirate life was a constant lesson in resilience, awareness, and adaptation. Ordinary men, once constrained by poverty, war, or forced labor, learned quickly that the ocean demanded constant attention and decisive action. Dawn brought the usual chores: repairing sails frayed by wind, tightening ropes, scrubbing decks slick with salt and fish, preparing minimal meals, and rationing water. Each task carried risk. Mistakes could lead to lost cargo, injury, or death. Men developed instincts sharpened by repetition and necessity, learning to act swiftly and accurately in every circumstance. Illness remained an ever-present threat. Scurvy, fevers, dysentery, and infections stalked the crew silently. Pirates had no doctors or hospitals, only crude remedies, herbs, alcohol, and shared knowledge. Ordinary men became caregivers and improvisers, understanding that survival depended on health as much as skill. Each recovery reinforced trust and highlighted the value of shared expertise aboard ship. Discipline aboard pirate vessels was practical and consistent. Captains earned their positions through skill, judgment, and respect, while quartermasters mediated disputes and represented the crew. Theft, desertion, or insubordination could result in marooning or execution. Ordinary men understood that reliability, competence, and trust were more valuable than rank, wealth, or background. The safety and function of the ship depended on clear, enforceable rules. Pirate crews were diverse and multicultural. English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial men worked together, relying on skill and courage rather than background or heritage. Temporary equality emerged out of necessity. The ship could not survive if any man failed in his duties. Ordinary men discovered autonomy and influence previously denied to them ashore, experiencing a form of respect rooted in practicality rather than privilege. Navigation required relentless attention. Currents, tides, winds, and trade routes shaped every decision. Storms could arrive without warning, while calm seas demanded vigilance to prevent mistakes or ambushes. Ordinary men became adept at observation, prediction, and decision-making. Knowledge of the ocean became both power and protection, a critical advantage in a world of uncertainty. Moral ambiguity permeated pirate life. Crews attacked enemy ships, occasionally neutral vessels, sometimes carrying vital supplies. Ethics were subordinate to survival. Ordinary men learned to weigh necessity against consequence, understanding that each choice impacted not only their lives but the cohesion of the crew. Pragmatism became a survival skill as essential as skill with sails or weapons. Night offered brief calm but no complete safety. Watch shifts were maintained. Whispered memories of family and past hardships were shared, and soft songs marked the passing hours. Sleep was light, fragmented, and measured. Men refined their senses, learning to detect subtle changes in sound, movement, or light. Ordinary men, once powerless, developed instinctive awareness critical for survival. The sea remained impartial and unyielding. It offered freedom, agency, and opportunity, yet demanded endurance, cooperation, and skill. Ordinary men, shaped by hardship and necessity, discovered competence, resilience, and autonomy. They navigated fear, danger, morality, and survival simultaneously, understanding that life on the ocean was a constant negotiation. Imagine standing on deck as the first stars appear. The water glimmers. The wind carries both salt and uncertainty. Every wave, sound, and shadow demands attention. Ordinary men, once invisible and oppressed, now navigate a world defined by survival, skill, and instinct. The ocean judges impartially, rewarding vigilance, experience, and courage, and punishing error or inattention. Here, freedom exists not as a right, but as a careful balance earned through every action and choice. Pirate life was an endless interplay of danger, skill, and fleeting freedom. Ordinary men, once confined by poverty, war, or oppression, found themselves navigating a world where every decision mattered. Dawn brought the same rigorous routines: inspecting sails, repairing ropes, scrubbing decks, cooking meager meals, and rationing water. Each task held consequences. A misstep could damage the ship, ruin provisions, or invite attack. Men honed their instincts, learning to act swiftly and deliberately in every moment. Illness lingered like a silent predator. Scurvy, fevers, dysentery, and infections claimed lives slowly and unpredictably. Pirates had no physicians, only rudimentary remedies. Alcohol, herbs, and knowledge passed among the crew. Ordinary men became caregivers, improvisers, and teachers, understanding that their survival and that of their comrades depended on health as much as skill. Each recovery reinforced trust and emphasized the importance of shared expertise. Discipline maintained order in a world defined by chaos. Captains were chosen for experience, skill, and judgment. Quartermasters mediated disputes and ensured fair enforcement of rules. Theft, desertion, or defiance could result in marooning or death. Ordinary men realized that reliability, competence, and loyalty mattered more than birth or wealth. Predictable and enforceable rules kept the fragile microcosm of a pirate ship functional. Crews were diverse, including English, Irish, Scottish, African, and colonial men. Cultural differences existed, yet necessity enforced cooperation. Skill, courage, and trust outweighed prejudice. Temporary equality emerged naturally. The ship could not survive without every man performing his duties. Ordinary men experienced a rare sense of agency, influence, and respect, shaped by practical necessity rather than social privilege. Navigation required constant vigilance. Currents, tides, winds, and trade routes dictated every decision. Storms could appear suddenly. Calm seas required attention to avoid accidents or ambush. Ordinary men became skilled observers, planners, and quick decision-makers. Knowledge of the sea became a weapon, a shield, and a form of authority. Moral ambiguity was inseparable from survival. Pirates attacked enemy ships, sometimes neutral vessels, occasionally essential trade. Ethics bowed to necessity. Ordinary men learned to weigh consequences, survival, and crew cohesion with each choice. Every action carried weight, shaping the life of the individual and the community aboard ship. Night offered calm but demanded vigilance. Watch shifts persisted, whispered memories of home and hardship circulated, and soft songs marked time. Sleep was light and intermittent. Ordinary men honed acute senses, detecting subtle movements, sounds, and light. Those once powerless now navigated a world where awareness was life itself. The sea was an impartial teacher, offering freedom, agency, and danger in equal measure. Ordinary men, forged by necessity and hardship, discovered competence, resilience, and autonomy. They learned to balance fear, morality, and survival simultaneously, recognizing that life at sea required constant negotiation and adaptability. Imagine standing on deck under a sky fading into twilight. The water glimmers faintly, wind carries salt and possibility, and every ripple carries meaning. Ordinary men, once invisible and oppressed, now navigate survival, freedom, and skill with every breath and movement. The ocean watches, impartial, indifferent, yet revealing lessons to those who endure, adapt, and remain attentive. Here, freedom is earned, danger is constant, and life is lived in every careful choice. And now we reach the final stretch of this journey, the quiet conclusion to a life lived between waves and wind. Ordinary men, who once knew only poverty, oppression, and hardship, had become skilled, vigilant, and resilient. Life aboard a pirate ship was a continuous lesson in observation, endurance, and adaptation. Every creak of the hull, shift of the sails, glint on the horizon, or distant call carried meaning. Each day had demanded work, attention, and courage. Survival required cooperation, skill, and pragmatism, and ordinary men had learned to navigate all with precision. Illness, danger, storms, and enemy ships had been constant companions. Crews were diverse, rules were strict yet fair, and morality was balanced by necessity. Ordinary men had discovered agency and influence, respect and expertise, in a world where each choice could determine life or death. The sea had tested them endlessly, shaping them into figures defined by resilience, skill, and instinct rather than circumstance or birth. As the sun sets, imagine the deck bathed in warm, fading light. The water reflects gold and deep blue. The wind brushes gently against your face, carrying the faint scent of salt and adventure. Waves lap softly, a rhythm both calming and alive. Ordinary men stand alert yet reflective, knowing that survival has taught lessons impossible to learn on land. Lessons of observation, patience, courage, and unity. Now close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the gentle sway beneath your feet as if the ship rocks with you. The past hardships, the struggles of poverty and oppression, and the relentless demands of the sea fade into memory. What remains is endurance, the quiet strength gained from survival, and the freedom earned by knowledge, skill, and cooperation. Let the calm of the waves fill your mind. Imagine the stars above, the soft night breeze, and the sound of the ocean stretching endlessly. Ordinary men have become extraordinary in their resilience. Their story is not one of legend alone, but of real lives shaped by history, adversity, and survival. And as you hold this image in your mind, the rocking ship, the salt air, the soft murmur of waves, allow yourself to breathe again, deeply, slowly. The sea is vast, the night is calm, and in this quiet, the story rests for now as you carry the lessons of courage, endurance, and freedom with you.